Hey, Rick from DreamSideOut. Well, it's time to convert a box van into a living space. Okay, first of all, if you watched my earlier videos, you'll remember that I had basic requirements for the kind of vehicle I was willing to live in. I had some basic needs that I had to have for a living space, and I kind of did a lot of thinking about that, and I narrowed it down to a few things. One, I needed to be able to stand up in it. That's just important to me. The older you get, the bending down and having to do that all the time gets to be more annoying. And also, I wanted to have a comfortable bed. That's a big essential. And I wanted enough elbow room to be able to kind of move around and have a workspace, because my space is kind of an art studio on wheels is really what it is. I have a computer digital work that I do on a computer, but I also need a drawing table for doing actual drawing and painting. So I do that kind of stuff, and I want to have that with me all the time. And of course, the basic reason for having it in the first place is to have a shelter, have a roof over my head, so that I'm out of the weather. In the Pacific Northwest, it rains a lot, so I don't want to sleep outdoors all the time. I want to keep the rain off. Now, those are just my basic requirements. If I have a bed, a roof over my head, and some basic human need things like with me, food and water and stuff like that, you have a shelter. That's a shelter that you can live in. So here's the space. As you see, I've got some junk in here already. It's amazing how an empty space doesn't stay that way for long. It immediately gets cluttered. But this is basic stuff I need to do some work on the van. There's my solar panels leaning up against the wall. You see my batteries, my electrical stuff up front, my spare tire, a few tools, some water, my propane tank, and some other stuff. And that's all essentials that I need to start this job. And I have a certain amount I'm going to get done today. If I get that done, I'll feel good about it. So, what is the first thing you do to make a box van livable? Raise your hand. Yeah, you're right. You cut a hole in the door, in the bulkhead right there, so you can pass through. If you don't do that in this kind of a van, you can create a prison for yourself real quick. Because if you lock that or close that back door and it latches while you're in here, you're actually trapped. You can't get out. So the very first thing I'm going to do is put the pass-through door in there. And once I do that, this space is actually, at that point forward, a livable space. All I need to do is throw a cot, a sleeping bag, and some basic essentials in here, and I can have a space to live in. It's that quick. But I do have to have that pass-through door. So I'll take you through the process of how I cut the pass-through door. Okay, before I get started on this, just a couple words about this kind of a van. The reason I like this kind of a box van is because this is a cutaway van, it's called. If you see this row of rivets right here, those are the fasteners that are holding the box to the cab. So that rivet pattern shows you where the top of the cab is approximately. It's a little higher than that because there's a flange that comes down like that, about like that. So what I'm going to do is cut a door below that and between the seats. That way I have a way to get through to the driver's side. These are the tools I'm using to do the job. I have a framing square, a straight edge, a power saber saw, a drill, my Ryobi drill, a package of saw blades, and believe me, I'll probably go through all of those, and a couple of drill bits, a small one for a pilot hole, a larger one to make a hole so that the saber saw fits through it, and then some basic safety stuff. Make sure when you do this, wear eye protection and wear some gloves. And I highly recommend covering up your arms and any exposed skin, because this throws little pieces of fiberglass out, and it's very irritating to your skin and to your eyes if you get it in there, especially your eyes. You don't want that stuff on you. So, this wall, this material is called FRP, fiberglass reinforced plywood. It's 2 layers of fiberglass, a layer on the outside and a layer on the inside, and then resin impregnated plywood for the core. So it's kind of a composite sandwich material. It's used in a lot of applications. Real high-end RVs use this actually for the outer walls. And of course it's used in box trucks all the time. So anyway, that's one of the reasons I like this kind of box van too. Now, where do I cut the hole? That's the next question I need to answer. This is one of the things I'm going to change up from my last van that I did. Last time I cut a hole all the way almost to the floor, not thinking that, yeah, I need that much room to pass through. And when nothing's in the way, it's great to have a door that size. You can get through it real easy. Just bend over and it's not a big deal. But I ended up not using it that way because I had the bed across here, and what happened was the way I started framing it up, I kind of started framing up things without a lot of thought of exactly how I was going to do it. I kind of framed it as I went, and I framed up some vertical pieces that were about 6 inches out, and I made a top space, a shelf up there, and I was intending to use the side spaces for cabinets, and then the bed was moved forward. What that did is it created a barrier on the below. I didn't need the door to go all the way to the floor. And one of the constant things I struggled with living in that van was I used the underside of the bed for storage, and every time it hit the brakes, stuff would slide forward onto the door panels, and I had to do things to stop that from happening. And I thought then that, boy, I didn't even need the door to go clear to the floor. So this time, I'm going to cut the door right down to where the top of the bed structure is going to be. That way, everything under the bed will be stopped from going forward. The mattress might stick up a little bit, but that's okay. What you're seeing right there is the old bed horse that I had in the middle of my old bed. That I salvaged that out of the old van so that I could get the dimension off of it, because I spent some time figuring out the height of my bed. That's a good height for a bed, and then on top of that goes a mattress, and it comes out to be a pretty good size standard bed. And that's one of the things I wanted to have in a van. I think when you get up and down every day out of bed, you want to sit on the bed, twirl 90 degrees, and then lay down. That's kind of a human thing to do. You want it to fit your legs. It's an ergonomic thing. And laying down on the ground to get in bed is okay, or climbing up on a ladder to get in bed, that's okay. A lot of people are okay with that, and that's just another way of doing it. I just wanted that to be more of a standard kind of bed type thing that I can sit on, and then the other thing is, if I put the bed against the wall, it makes a back that I can lean against, and the bed also becomes a couch. So that's what I'm going to do this time, and that's what I regretted in my last van, because I wasn't able to lean back against those walls because there's a gap there, and there's a big, and I never really used that space either. I thought I was going to, and I never did. It didn't work out. So these are little things you figure out as you go. These are lessons learned from my last one. Okay, I'm putting this bed horse, I call it, up against the wall. I made a mark right there to mark the bottom of it. See my pencil mark right there? That's where the bed structure would probably go. Now, about 6 inches above that, right about here, would be where the mattress goes. That gives me a door height from here to here. I'm not sure if that's going to be enough. I think I'm going to need it down here to hang my legs over and then bend over and get in. But that's what I was doing the whole time for 2 years. I only used that much of the door to get in and out. I didn't need the rest of it. So there's no point in cutting the hole all the way to the floor. The other thing I want to point out here is that the width of my bed is going to be exactly the same as my last bed. So here's a problem I have to deal with right off the bat. This gas receptacle is coming in right where the bed leg needs to go, approximately. That's okay. I can work around that. I'm going to construct it, and you see if I put it here, it's right in the way, and I'll have that thing sticking out from the bed. There's going to be a little bit of a gap between the bed and the wall, but it's going to be filled in with, there's going to be a ledge, kind of a little ledge there, and I'll explain that further. As you see, when you do something like this, you've got to plan several moves ahead. I'm fortunate in that I did most of my initial planning on the last van, and I'm just carrying that over into the new one with a few modifications. You can't just go cut a hole in the wall without being aware of where everything else is going to go, like I did the first time. So think about it, spend some time thinking about your layout. I'm going to have a video, I think, when I have a little spare time here, on how I came up with my floor plan, because I had a specific method that I used to figure out how I should lay things out in my van, and I'll explain that. But for now, I'm just going to take you through this hole cutting procedure. The width of the hole needs to be determined, and if I have, for instance, a sliding door that's going to open and close, which I am going to have, probably not right away. I'll probably put a curtain there for a while, but as I eventually build a sliding door. Sliding doors are really great for right there. Where that worked great for me last time, so I'm going to make another one right there. So if you have a sliding door, obviously you can't have the door width wider than the sides, right? Because the sliding door will stick out and won't slide all the way open. So it's got to be smaller, slightly smaller than 1/3 of the entire width here. So if I break it into thirds, the door should be right about there. And then you've got the seats are right on the other side of that bulkhead, and you got to consider where those are too. A framing square is an essential tool in box van building, or maybe any kind of van building. If you have a constant line, which is the floor edge, you want to go perpendicular off of that with your measurements. It's not like building a house where you can use a level, because I'm not building on a fixed foundation here. This driveway isn't perfectly level, and so I can't rely on a bubble level to give me a perfect horizontal line. I have to calculate my measurements off of a line that I know is constant. So I'm using the floor edge there to measure up, and I want equal measurements from the floor at the width of the door. This is one of the reasons I like a box van, folks. It's a box, and it makes these kind of things a little easier. So where then do I start? How do I find the edge of the door and find the measurement to the outer edges? Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center line of the box. There's a couple ways to do that. I can measure across, divide by 2, and put a mark there. I could make an X, snap a line if I wanted to do that from there to there, and that would determine the center. I'm just going to use a measurement method, and I'll show you how I do that. So the measurement method I'm going to use is this is an ancient method of using of carpentry type measurement. You'll see there I have a tape measure. Tape measures can get you into big trouble because they got so many marks on them. You can make a mistake and measure with at one place, carry the measurement somewhere else, and you look at the wrong mark, and it's easy to make mistakes, and you cut your material the wrong length. My dad taught me from his grandfather, who was a carpenter in the old country in Germany. He said he would not allow any carpenter on a building site to have a tape measure. He insisted that they use what's called a story pole. And the story pole I'm going to use is this piece of pine plank that I have laid down there. That's a piece of the bed frame from my last van that I'm going to salvage and use. But right now I'm going to use it as a story pole, and I'll show you how I do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little hand square, and I'm going to make a perfectly square right angle line on that board at what I think looks like the center. It won't be exactly the center, but I'm going to make a mark there where I think the center is. This is one of the cool things about being human, because we can do this in our brains. We can look at something, and we can say, I think right about there looks like about halfway between. Now that's a very human, abstract thing to do. I don't know if animals can do that, but that's something we do, and we do it pretty well. Like I say, now I can cheat a little bit because there's a rivet right in the center. I could kind of use that to gauge, but I don't really want to get it exactly on the center. I want to get the line over a little bit toward one side, and I'll show you why that is. This is very awkward to do while I'm holding a camera. I need a camera person right now, but I put the hand square right there, and I'm going to draw a line right there, and I'm just going to show you that I'm doing that. I can't hold the camera and do it at the same time, so I'm going to draw the line, stop the camera, draw the line, and then I'll show you what I did. So I drew the line, and I put a little arrow pointing to the left. That means that's toward the wall. Put indications on your measurements so you don't get mixed up. Now, if I move that up against the wall, that's not in the center. It's a little off center to the left. So moving that up to the wall, I'm going to make a mark on the wall right there. See? Now what I'm going to do is flip the board over so that it's tight against the other side of the wall. If you see, I turned the board over, put it against that wall, and I made another mark on the wall right there, see? Right, so there's the first mark there, there's the second mark, and here's the board flipped over. Now I'm going to do something really bizarre. I'm going to use the board to tell me the story of where the center line is. By the way, that's my great-grandfather's hand square right there, and I'm going to use it. Thank you, Grandpa, for passing that down. I'm going to use that to project that mark off of the wall and onto the board. See? So I projected the mark onto the storyboard. Now I have two lines on the storyboard. Now I'm going to use those two lines to find the center. Does anybody have an idea of how I'm going to do it? If you can answer in less than 0.5 seconds, you're a genius. You're right. I drew an X across there because if you draw an angle through the points of the rectangle made by the lines and the parallel sides of the board, guess what? You end up with a center point right there. Now all I need to do is project that center onto the wall, and I know where the center of this box van is. There's the center line, but I'm still working from this edge. I haven't turned the board over again. I'm keeping it on that edge, but now I know exactly where the center is. See, I was mistaken. I thought that was the center rivet before, and I was way off, wasn't I? Those two rivets are straddling the center. There's the actual center of the box van. So all I got to do is put a mark on the wall, and that's the center. So now I found the center and the height of the door. What I need to do now is determine how wide the door is. Where am I going to put the width? And that can be, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. I can, like I say, I can make it less than a third of the width. And again, I'm not going to use measurements to figure that out. I could, but it's not. It doesn't matter. Sometimes measurements help if you're using standard sized material, of course, like a 48-inch piece of plywood. You sometimes want to know where that 48 inches is going to fit into your environment. So for that reason, a tape measure does come in handy for that kind of stuff. But for most things like this, where you're doing a very important thing, you want that door centered, I would highly recommend this method. Okay, I'm inside the cab, and I'm just checking it out here. On this box truck, the flange holding the box on comes down, you know, about, looks like about, I'm just going to roughly say 3/4 of an inch from the center of the fastener. So if I kept the door edge down an inch, and then I hold another 1/2 inch. The reason for that is I want to put some trim, a trim piece around the door, and I want to have some space to do that there. So I'm going to hold the top of the door down about that far. So I want to make sure I get the top in a good place where I'm going to have room to put a trim piece. I'm thinking for a trim, I'm going to use some sort of C-channel aluminum, but I haven't quite figured that out for sure yet. Okay, and I moved the seats all the way forward because I'm going to be drilling holes and using the saber saw to cut in just a few minutes. So at this point, before I project any lines up further, I'm going to go ahead and project the layout to the forward part of the bulkhead and find the upper corners from the other side. And as I showed you, the reason why. I want the top to be far enough below the fasteners. I could probably just go off of these fasteners, but I want to really make sure. Okay, the cut was it's a little wavy, but it's pretty good. Just a word of, I started into the cut. I wasn't thinking before I started, because I remember the last time I had a problem, and I stopped and started over again. So let me just go through this with you. When you cut through this stuff on a door like this, do the bottom cut first, do the sides second, and then do the top last. Do you know why? Well, if you do it the other way around and you're trying to cut the bottom, the blade will bind, and there's no way you can keep it from binding. Well, you could put some wedges in there, but it just creates a hassle. So if you do it that way, the last part of the cut will be one of the corners up there, and when you get to that corner, it just falls out, and in this case, it fell inward. I'm surprised to see that this looks like it's a little bit thinner material than what the U-Haul truck had, but it's okay. It's still pretty good. Stinks right now. I threw some sawdust around, but now I got a hole through. So it turns out that this C-channel from Home Depot fits perfectly on this FRP, and I think this is about, it looks like 1/2 inch. I didn't measure it exactly, but it works perfect, either 1/2 or 5/8. What I did is I notched out, so I made these pieces notched at the top like that, And then the side pieces are just a straight through piece. So the bottom and the top are notched. And I just did that with a hacksaw and a file. It's very easy. You can work aluminum fairly easy if you're just careful how you do it. And then those fit right in there. And the reason I did this is because, see, even without any glue holding it in, the top piece is held in there by the side pieces. That's what's called in construction, that's called a post and beam. And that's a basic paradigm that is used throughout just about anything you build. A post is a vertical piece, a beam is a horizontal piece, a post holds a beam. So whenever you build something, just think in terms of post and beam, because your gravity will tend to pull this down, and abuse will pull it down, but it's locked in there because of these posts. And it can't go anywhere on the bottom either. So now if I just put a little bit of epoxy around those, I'm going to use some epoxy. Where is it here? Sorry about this filming. This Gorilla epoxy 2-part glue. I got a couple of containers full of that. You squirt it out, mix it, and apply it, and I think that'll hold those things on there forever. That gives me a nice finished trim around the opening so that I can get in and out without scraping myself. And that'll do for now.